Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Rupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today. Carrie Davidson is the founder and CEO of Tournesol Wellness, which is the leading holistic health education institution in New York City. Now, this is fascinating. I'm a coach and I help other people figure out their lives and how to take next steps and all kinds of stuff. But I'm also very much fascinated how so much of our environment is not actually us. It's like what's going on around us. And a lot of times the challenges that we have are not in us, but it's stuff that's like dealing it's under the surface stuff. Like you're angry not because something actually bad happened to you, but because you're running these processes all the time through your mind of not being enough or frustration or what are they all going to think about you, etc. And if you learn how to quiet that stuff down, your productivity and your success go through the roof. So the tables were really turned on me in this interview. I had definitely had Carrie give a little bit of background about the amazing work that she does. But then we just did it. She diagnosed my personality according to her system, and it was pretty shocking, the accuracy that she had. And also my wife filled out her information as well, and we had a very personal analysis. Bottom line is, and this is part one of hopefully many, you got to understand who you are. You have to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, your personality traits, because if you don't, it's very, very hard to get stuff done and get stuff done in a sense of, with a mindset of happiness and a sense of appreciation. So that's why you need professional help or semi-professional help or whatever you want to call it. That we are oftentimes not the best stewards of our own ship because sometimes we don't know what the ship entails, so to speak. And once you understand what you have and what you're working with, then you can really take ownership over your life and have the kinds of relationships that you want, have the kind of businesses that you want, be the parent that you want to be, really work through all of those, all of that darkness and those challenges and those opportunities. And with no further ado, here's Carrie Davidson. I am so thrilled to have Carrie Davidson with me today, who is the founder of Tournesol Wellness, which is a very innovative health company. And she has a very fascinating approach to human health, wellness, and optimization. So, Carrie, just give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you got into your current position, and sort of how you see yourself positioned in the market of human optimization.
Sure. So, I started my career as head of human resources at Columbia, uptown from here at Columbia University. And I was always frustrated by seeing sadness at work. And I knew that in order to do something about it, I had to attach it to outcomes. So in order to convince the leadership that we needed to really address making people enjoy their time at work better, I had to really tie it into turnover and engagement and productivity. And so I spent the first half of my work life really building programming to make people's experience at work better.
Do you see very practical, impact on a company and a corporate culture where people are not happy?
Absolutely. I mean, what was starting to happen is, people would come into my office and close the door and cry about what was going on at home, what was going on with their kids, and what was going on with communication among coworkers and friends, and that they didn't know what to expect at work, and so certain things started to become clear that were patterns, that that their home life, struggles were seeping into their ability to do well at work. Managers were frustrated that people weren't showing up. People were coming in late. People were disengaged. And so then all the students we served or the faculty we served, they didn't enjoy their experience with us either. So many pieces were being impacted by someone's overall well-being and their ability to feel safe and happy in their lives. So it would definitely seep in. Everyone was impacted. I mean, did you ever go like, you know, if you're walking around and someone smiles at you, just a stranger, you're like, oh, that's nice. It's kind of like you feel it. And if someone's a jerk to you, you feel it. It's like it impacts your day. So if you know, what's going on for those people? You know, maybe the person who's smiling just like, you know, just got engaged or just got good news. And so that actually emanates out into the world, you know, and it impacted you. And now maybe you're going home and you're going to have a better day and you're going to have more, you know, patience with your kids. So yeah, I was just noticing how everything impacts everything, that we cannot isolate one component of our lives and think that like, oh, if everything's really cruddy at home, your work life still can be great. And it wasn't the case, you know, and that's kind of how I kind of naturally went into the whole idea of holistic health as well. I mean, I think everything about my work career has been looking at a much bigger picture, that there's something else at play here. And we're so like isolating and reductionist in our thinking that, oh, you have a cut, let me give you a Band-Aid.
It's fascinating. You're sort of at the cutting edge of this corporate awareness that it's more than just the 9 to 5 that matters. But how do you talk to people about why employee happiness is important?
Well, it's always pretty personalized and individualized to the company. So the conversation usually starts with a very specific situation or the context of what's going on for them. Because through those very specific instances, you get to the core of like what's really out of balance. And it usually has to do with somebody, either the company or people at the company, not feeling safe, right? So that means that they're not having their needs met, right? We all have needs that need to be met in order for us to feel safe at work. For example, taking risks on behalf of the company, being creative, sharing our ideas, being vulnerable, right? If we don't feel safe, if every time I speak up, my boss yells at me, I'm going to stop speaking up. And I may have some really good ideas if you nurture my creativity. So really, I speak to them about, you know, tell me where the pain points are, tell me where you want to be, and then we start diving in to become more self-aware. So each individual understanding their needs for growth and how that aligns with the needs of the company and the goals of the company, and then we empower everybody. We empower everybody with skills for self-regulation and skills to empathize with the needs of their clients, with the needs of their teammates, with the needs of their staff. Once you have these, an ability to adapt, anything is possible. Because the biggest problems, like going back to my time at Columbia, the biggest problems are around communication and relationships. And if we don't understand ourselves, there is no way we can start communicating and relating and empathizing with our clients, the people who keep us in business. You know, how do I nurture someone who's tough? You know, and I teach that stuff.
So that it sounds to me that it's not just restricted to, as you said explicitly, it's not just restricted to the business setting, but this also is a theme that sounds like must play out in romantic relationships and the home life and even how we relate to ourselves. So could you break that process down a little bit? How does a person start if they're noticing either a lack of happiness, a sense of, you know, despair, maybe they sense a certain, you know, like an undiagnosed vulnerability with their spouse where they just feel uncomfortable and they don't really know why. Take me through the process of how do you start addressing those kinds of issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So I eat, sleep, dream, breathe this stuff. So I love it. And if I confuse you, bring me back. So I use a method where I look at people through the lens of the 5 elements of Chinese medicine methodology for growth, right? How we grow, how we naturally grow. And so the 5 elements that I'm referring to are fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. Each of the 5 elements has several correlations for body intelligence, cognitive intelligence, and then a higher level, you know, you could call it spiritual, you could call it higher purpose, meaning. So what I do is I first, everyone takes an assessment who works with me, and I get to see their spread of how strong each of the 5 elements is in their nature, what's their primary nature, which one is the lowest and needs more support. And once I understand, once I see someone's scores, I understand who their button pushers are, whose buttons they push, who they nurture, who nurtures them. So I understand a tremendous amount about how self-aware they are, how easily triggered they are, what will bring them back into balanced states, and then how to help them nurture the relationships in their lives. And that could be couples, it could be parents and kids, it could be in a classroom setting, it could be in a big company, it could be bringing on new staff members, staffing teams for, you know, or matching up clients with managers to make sure that you get the right balance of personality.
So I want to share for those that are listening that we have a little bit of behind the scenes work that have been done, and I actually filled out a sheet and submitted my answers. My wife also did. So maybe we will kind of take this process from, you know, because whenever I hear stuff like this, I always am thinking to myself like, wow, that's so exciting. The idea that, and it's fascinating, you know, the idea that the way that we're reacting to stuff. I mean, I guess, you know, subconsciously or consciously, we are aware that, you know, there are triggers that are in our life that are maybe making us act in a certain way. But practically speaking, when we are kind of have our heads just like in reality, all of the perceptions we have, they feel very, very real. And it's like, no, this person actually wronged me. That's why I'm upset. It's not that it's kind of recycling, you would say maybe stuff from childhood, or what you're saying is basic building blocks of personality. So whenever I hear anything like what you're saying, again, I don't have the same any familiarity with these different principles based on Chinese medicine. That's why we're talking to the expert. So I filled out the sheet, and my wife filled out the sheet, and we are, at least for myself, very willing guinea pigs. So take me through this process, please.
All right. So when we first spoke on the phone, because I do this so much, I could already tell a lot. And I don't know if you remember, I kind of pegged you as a particular type as being your primary because of like things you had said about what you like to do and how energetic you are and how like you move things forward. It's not like, you know, let's talk in April maybe. You know, you're like, all right, let's do it. Can we talk tomorrow? So your scores, your primary nature, which by the way, our primary nature is highly resistant to change over our lifetime. We will pretty much be from birth who we are. And what I mean by that is that, you know, the things that trigger you, the things that you're chronically like really good at without having to think about are always going to be the same. And the things that will bug you and the way that your body responds to being triggered will kind of always be your work. The other types and the other natures, when they start to, you know, bother you, it's kind of like a gnat. It's like, it doesn't bother you as much. There are certain very particular things that are going to bother each of us, and it's going to be our chronic work. So you may have noticed over your lifetime that, damn, I'm always dealing with the same thing. Why can't I learn that lesson?
Well, I mean, you know, it's funny because I think a lot of times the things that people see in us and I guess I'll just speak completely in the first person because I'm not going to be general about this. People recognize certain components of me and they say, oh, you'd be really good at this, or, this is your genius space, or just do you. Like I wrote a whole article about, how I don't like to feel like I'm put in a box, and everyone's like, great. So you do your thing. And I'm like, well, now that's so general, I don't know what to do. So put me in a box so I can start doing my thing. So it's really fascinating, this concept. So work me through it a little bit. Tell me sort of what I do and how my personality manifests itself for better or for worse, and how to work with it.
Okay, so each of the 5 types has kind of lives on this spectrum of strength and stress. Our biggest gift to the world and our biggest fear, right? So this thing we're naturally really good at actually keeps us naturally from experiencing our biggest fear. So your primary nature is wood. Wood people, their gift to the world is freedom. They're able to move things forward. There's no shackles. Like nothing is impossible. Anything is possible. We can do anything. Wood's biggest fear is confinement. So exactly what you just said. Don't put me in a box. But the interesting thing is the thing that bothers you the most, the confinement, actually helps you grow. As much as it's challenging, you kind of, just like exactly what you just said, and it's hysterical when I do these workshops with people, I almost don't have to talk much because you guys say it all. But that's exactly the point, is that our challengers, we do need them to feel safe in the world in order to function.
You're saying, just to define the word safety, the idea is that when you feel like your insanity is actually some kind of a pattern and that there's some kind of a way to navigate it, that provides a sense of safety. That's what, when you're saying safety, I'm trying to hear what that really means. Is that what you're saying?
So what I mean by safety is kind of like secure. Like it's the opposite of insecure. Right? It's the opposite. Like if you can imagine times when you don't feel confidence, when all of a sudden you feel off, when someone or something or a project isn't going, you just don't feel grounded.
Yeah.
So we have very specific needs in order to feel safe and grounded and secure. Otherwise, we go into our insecure states, which are radically different depending on which of the 5 types is your primary. When we go into our insecure states, we go into distorted thinking. And as soon as you understand what your distorted thinking looks like, you recognize it, then you become more self-conscious, self-aware. That's the self-awareness piece. And you know how to correct and bring yourself back into centered states. Because when you're in those distorted states, you can't fall in love. You can't solve problems. You can't be creative. You can't build a new partnership. It doesn't work because we're thinking in our logic, fixed mind, perspective. We're not thinking from our hearts, which is where all growth happens.
Brilliant.
So,
tell me more.
Do you want me to tell you a little bit more about you?
I want to hear it. I love it. Go for it.
Okay. So wood people. Wood people are brave leaders. They are risk takers. They like to be first, best, fastest. Right? Yeah. They love a good argument, but they like a challenge. Like they don't want someone who's just going to agree with every single thing they say. Like, tell me why I'm wrong. Like they feed off of that. It feels good. They're great in a debate. Wood people settled the wild, wild west. I mean, no one else would have done that. It's scary. So they're, wood people are amazing in a crisis. So if all hell's breaking loose, a wood person is calm and knows what to do and gets it done and gets everybody to safety fast. When they feel confined, and confinement can be a physical confinement, but it can also be someone saying, sorry, you can't do that, or no, that's not allowed, or here's the rules, or sorry, we closed 10 minutes ago. I don't care, get the manager on the phone. Like wood people don't like their ideas or their experience to be blocked, to anything to get in the way. They tend to say, I don't want to waste my time on that. Like things are a waste of time if it's like, do we have to celebrate everybody's birthday this month? It's like,
Right.
So they tend to be, they're very, very, very driven to move forward without thinking about all the things around them necessarily. They tend to be like, if you're looking at forest and trees, they're forest. They don't talk about the details. Like someone else deal with the details.
Right.
It's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it out today.
Right. Okay, good.
They tend to need movement, physical movement. They need to exercise. It makes them, without it, they don't feel safe. So they don't feel secure. They don't feel good. So they won't, if you ever don't exercise, you probably feel like, oh God, I need to at least run around the block 10 times. They like to plan, they love goals. They're actually really good coaches. So if you have like are you like a basketball coach, right? They love to tell everyone like, you can do it, go, you've got this. Wood people are easily and quickly frustrated. They go very quickly from 0 to 100. There's no pause. The same way they're quick to take care, like to move things forward in a positive way, they're quick to jump into their distorted states. They tend to have the hardest time with self-awareness in those moments. They tend to need some sort of reminder that's physical. They like communication. They don't want to be caught off guard. They want to know what to expect. They want to know what you're thinking. Like what's going on in your head?
So when you talk about this distorted state, does that mean that it's the dark side of the wood, or that I start taking on other personas? So it's like, if that makes sense, it's like, what does a distorted state mean? And what am I looking at that point?
So by distorted, I mean that you're not as clear thinking and able to have access to all the parts of your mind and body that help you grow, help you grow relationships, build new bridges, connect with people, fall in love, solve problems, start a new business, negotiate a contract with fairness. So what happens is when our safety is threatened, right? So for wood, that means confinement. When I feel confined, all of a sudden I go into like a fixed mindset state where we begin judging other people. We begin like,
it's so crazy.
We know, right? It's
right.
So fun.
But I'm saying like it's so I always felt weird because when part of being a father and being in the situation that we're in is if I start to perceive any kind of boxes that I'm locked into. So it would be, my wife, it gets very funny. Like we have this situation where when I want to talk about something or there's something that needs to be solved, so I try to solve it now. And my wife reminds me that the best time to solve problems, we have 4 little kids, is probably not when the 4 little kids are home screaming and like demanding attention. And so that limitation of having kids who have, whatever, like this is called having small children, is it's just like real time, consistently, you can't do what you have to do because there's kids that are running around. I'm trying to write something and my kids call, like it drives me nuts. So that's the idea. That's called a distortion because that's a limitation. There's a limitation on the amount of focus that I can allow to go towards the task that I want to achieve. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, and your distorted thoughts are, oh my God, they are keeping me from getting done what I have to get done. Like that's right.
Right.
That's a distorted thought because it's not coming from a place of empathy. Right. So sinking, that's a fixed mindset, logic, brain, like not thinking about, wait a minute, my kid, from her perspective, she's an earth person, and earth people are actually opposite.
Okay.
of wood. They just need connection. Take time to talk to me about your day and what's going on, and let me care about you. Give me a hug. They're not thinking about how to nurture your wood nature. They're too little. Children are our biggest teachers. I'm sure you know that.
Right.
And so in these cases, like especially when we're parenting, it challenges our nature more than anything, because when our needs are not met, that it throws us into this space where it's much harder to be empathetic.
Yeah.
My primary nature is fire. I need joy. I need happy. I need connection. And if I go home and my kids are sad, I'm like, oh, let's tell jokes and be goofy. And they're like, that doesn't work for me. But that's my distorted state. My distorted state can turn into panic, can turn into overwhelm and anxiety. But my thinking that everything is healed with a joke is like, that's my natural state. Yours is let's move fast, get it done. Oh, like you have an idea, it has to be finished now.
Right. The idea that I'm just trying to jump over barriers in order to get to where I'm really trying to get to, even if I don't really know where I'm getting to, but I just see okay, well, this is the problem. Let's just go through it. So it sounds like the same way that you try to solve. Again, this is not like I'm sure this is operating kind of like the operating system, not necessarily what's on the screen, but it's like you're solving situations by trying to make people happy, or to put yourself back in a happy state. My natural solution is to just jump over barriers until we can get to a point where there's no more problems, which of course is a fairly unrealistic goal or expectation.
But sometimes, you see, the thing is, we need all of these special gifts that we all bring to the table. Mm-hmm. If we didn't sometimes jump over barriers to move things forward, can you imagine if there's like an emergency or a fire and everyone sits around like, oh, let me just make you happy. Or let's talk about, how do you feel about this fire?
Right.
So, yeah.
So how, now, if you could share a little bit, I am one of the things that my wife and I oftentimes have is, and we're very open about, is that, like literally when I brought up the idea about her filling out the form, she said, well, just pick whatever the opposite of what you would naturally do, and that's going to be my profile. Is that we have very, very different ways of looking at the world.
So kind of what she said, like whatever is the opposite of you, kind of and sort of, you do both meet. You both have very high fire. Oh, sorry, I was looking at scratch that. You both have very high earth.
Tell us a little bit about earth.
So Earth people on that spectrum of strength or gifts and their biggest stressors, their gift to the world is unity and empathy and community and being a cohesive, glue to a team or a family or a friendship. That's the most important thing. Pleasing other people, taking care of other people. Their biggest fear is abandonment. So if you can think about if you're always working to empathize and to take care of people's needs, no one's ever going to leave.
Right.
So that's the spectrum that they work on, and that's kind of their sense of self and purpose in the world. So in this cycle, there's a very particular cycle of the way these 5 elements are situated. Wood, fire, and then earth, and then metal and water. There are very specific challengers that I mentioned before, and nurturing energies. Wood can really challenge earth, and earth can challenge wood too.
And you're saying my wife's primary trait is earth. Wood, earth. Okay, great. Which means what?
Well, which means that when you guys are both in your distorted states, when you're not having your needs met, when you're stressed, when you didn't get enough sleep, you're not eating well, things aren't going right, you're feeling confined, she's not feeling supported, you're going to push each other's buttons. That's what it means, basically. They're also in a very simple form, you're going to push each other's buttons because your core need in the world is not to have any boundaries. Like, let's move it forward. And her need is, well, let's sit and be cohesive and take time together. You're like, we don't have time. Like, oh, this is a problem. Let's fix it. Is it fixed?
Right.
Like, even when I worked with couples who are, kind of in therapy or needing therapy, and they've talked about there's a wood guy and an earth female, and the guy is like, how many sessions is it going to take? How quickly is he going to get over this?
Yeah.
And she's like, is he going to understand? Like, is he going to understand me? Are we going to is he going to empathize with who I am? Mm-hmm. And he's just like, how quickly? Is it just one session?
Right, for sure. So when you have these very different, and I don't know in your experience if you trying to find, again, let's take it to a slightly out of the current realm and into a more general thing. Do you try to find someone that is of your same nature, or is really the goal you're probably going to be attracted to someone of a different nature, and it's a matter of learning how to understand and manage your own temperament and then kind of getting where your spouse is coming from?
Yeah, I think ideally you could really partner with anyone of any type. Where I work with people is understanding and empathizing with your own and your partner's stress states and knowing what they need to feel safe so that you can speak to them in that way, because you can achieve the same thing with different words. You don't have to be say a certain, like, for example, for wood people need a choice. They don't like to be confined by being told what to do. So if you have a wood child, for example, who has to get to school on time, they don't want to be confined by the rules. They don't want to have to get in the car at 8 o'clock. So, but if you say, hey, you know what? Your child needs to put on a pair of shoes. You don't really care if the shoes match or if the shoes are the wrong color. It doesn't really matter. So basically you can say, hey, Jill, you can put on the red shoes, the blue shoes, or the yellow shoes. I'm going to leave and you decide. And then all of a sudden they're empowered to be in charge, which is all they want.
Right.
And you get what you want. You needed her to put on her shoes.
For sure.
So yeah, it's about understanding your needs for safety, asking to have your needs met, knowing where the common ground is. So there are like bridges, within this model that is places that are safe for both of you to go. For you guys, your bridge is fire. Fire is about feelings. So it's safe for both of you. It doesn't push anybody's buttons for you guys to talk about, like, hey, I'm feeling really sad, or I'm feeling really angry, or I'm feeling really lonely, or I'm feeling, but make sure you're talking about a feeling and not blaming someone else for your feelings, because we kind of, many of us do that. It's such a fundamental lesson that I don't know if it's, and you would know this, if this is just restricted to our two personality types, but I think that it's so natural to blame, and it's so difficult to identify a feeling, but it's ironic and it's frustrating in a lot of ways. Like I literally had this experience yesterday where an unsafe version of myself would have said, you're not spending any time with me. And the more, whatever you would call it, safe version would say, I feel a little bit lonely. Or, again, like you said, like when there's certain levels of even like deadlines and projects, when they get presented to me, stress me out, because that's it's like, okay, so now do it. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. So that sense of uncertainty was something that I just wanted to share. So when I shared uncertainty or I shared loneliness, then it was very well received. But if it would come back and be a blaming, well, look what you didn't do, or as a result of this, that, and the other thing, now I'm all messed up, that never works.
You know, but it takes it, like, we've been married for a long time for that to actually be even a mindset that pops up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because we are trained to know, like, when we have a physical pain, that we need it checked out. Physical pain in my arm, oh my God, my body's sending me a message that I need to go get my arm checked out. I'm not saying to my husband, oh my God, my arm's hurting, you made my arm hurt.
Right.
But our feelings and our emotions are the same thing. It's our body's way of telling us we have unmet needs for safety. That's all it is.
Well, that, you know, and that's also such a fundamental component. There's a great book that we read called How to Work on Your Marriage Without Talking About It. And one of the principles of the book was that when a woman and again, I'm not sure how this all fits into levels of medicine, but the, basic thing is that a woman is, when she shares emotional struggles, she's sharing for the sake of sharing. And the man hears it as his failure. Or something like that, and so when a woman is speaking to her husband about something that's difficult, the man's not hearing, I'm hurt. They're hearing, well, you failed, and had you been a better whatever, and it puts him into a very defensive state. And the interesting point is exactly that. When a person has a physical cut or pain, no one takes it personally, but it's a lot harder to do that on an emotional thing, but it could be the exact same thing. The fact that your wife or your husband is upset or depressed or frustrated or feeling unfulfilled might not have to do anything with you, but because you can't see it, it's very easy to say, oh, I guess if I was a better husband, wife, spouse, you would feel, when in reality, of course, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. And going back to that, really sometimes that's the case, because sometimes it depends on what's your what temperament you are. If it's not temperament based, we're actually causing harm to probably 40 to 60% of the population. So that truth about, like, men and women is only true depending on what temperament you are,
right.
And how strong, how easily triggered you are, and your balance of each of these 5 elements in your nature. So sometimes it's the woman who will feel that way, and sometimes that's not at all what's felt. Sometimes, like water people, you might say something to them and they're just like, I don't even want to engage. And they isolate and they disappear, and all of a sudden, and then they go and they problem solve totally alone. They come back like the next day, like, hey,
you're good. And you're like, oh, that was easy. Carrie, okay, so here's the issue. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. We have to, I want to hear so much more from you and about the important work you're doing. For the end of part A, please tell our listeners and our viewers how we can find out more about you, your company, the different personality types, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.tournesolwellness.com, which is TOURNESOL wellness.com. You can email me, info@tournesolwellness.com. My direct assistant gets that. And yeah, I mean, I love doing this. This is like, so definitely bring it on.
There you have it, folks, another inspiring episode. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to please share this with your friends and to like us over on Rabbi Rupp through Facebook or on YouTube. And the more that we're able to get these important messages out, the more that we can really make an impact in the world. So I encourage you, please, to stay tuned. We have a ton of amazing speakers coming up, and also to tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.